Welcome back, guys, to this is two guys and a stack of comics.
That's Mike, I'm Reed, and today we are going to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Kind of our thoughts on what's going on with Marvel right now and what we think they could do to kind of get back on track. Because I think we've kind of seen Marvel go in some directions that maybe have not exactly worked.
Weird things are happening at Marvel. It's like it's not coherent like it used to be.
Yep.
I think they kind of drove the car off the cliff.
Yep.
Like after Endgame, it was like, what do we do from here?
Yeah, I think that's the crazy thing is like the first 3 phases, I think, of Marvel, the first 20-something movies, they seem to have such a plan. You could tell everything was there, and it kind of seemed like, especially compared to DC, they seemed to be playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. And
So wait a minute, like the first Marvel, well, of course, they had the Spider-Man movies, but then Marvel
Yep.
made Iron Man.
Yeah, the MCU.
And I honestly don't think at that point they had the plan for Endgame, but then they kind of worked their way up to it. After they had, what was the second one after?
Well, the Incredible Hulk had Iron Man in the end credits. And
Yeah.
then you had Nick Fury in the end credits of Iron Man. And then Iron Man 2 kind of kicked the ball going. War Machine showed up. Black Widow showed up.
And then they were on a roll.
Yeah.
And they really did. The whole thing was just awesome. So then after Endgame,
Kind of just went down.
they kind of imploded a little bit. Like, well, not so much imploded, but it kind of
Just
went
went
crazy.
in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's been crazy is it's even showing in the box office form. What's weird is Marvel was this unstoppable juggernaut for years. I mean, pretty much from 2008 when Iron Man came out to basically the start of the pandemic. Where they could basically put their name on any movie, and it would
That's
go
why
almost
they
$1 billion.
attracted the attention of Mr. Disney over there.
Yep.
They saw dollars, and they thought we can't lose.
And it's weird because Disney initially seemed to be a huge asset for them. They threw a lot of money into it. You could tell there was a lot of press, there was a lot of planning, there was a lot of power behind it. You started seeing more Marvel merchandise everywhere. And then you can kind of tell it I think where phase 4 really after Endgame off the tracks is Disney got their claws a little bit too much into it.
And what we were talking about earlier was, back in the day when things were rolling, they were on like 2 movies a year.
2 to 3 movies at most, yeah.
And, there's only so many dollars in the pockets of moviegoers to go see a movie. Like, now you're getting 4, 6 movies a year.
TV shows,
the TV
tie-in
shows,
cartoons.
It's bound to eat into the success of the different projects, let alone the creative force that was behind the original
Plan of everything.
plan, was central and focused, and now it seems more dispersed. They got different directors, new writers. Things are going this way, then they're going that way, and then they try and tie this in. I really don't know.
It just zigzags too much now to keep your attention. I think that was the admirable thing Marvel did early on. Was it was like a book, and every movie was a different chapter.
There was that end point that they were coming to, and now I don't know where they're going. I don't think.
Well, I think the biggest issue that you're seeing in almost all the comic books right now is this multiverse concept, in that it's a cool concept in theory, but what it ends up doing is it kind of feels cheap. Because you can always just pull another version of a character from the multiverse.
It's kind of like a writer's off-ramp or on-ramp. It's an easy, what do they call it? It's an easy writer's tool to be able to use.
That's like a fix-all. It's the Deus Ex Machina, is what people call it, right? When you just, all of a sudden, things can just kind of...
Nope, we're in a new universe now, folks.
Nope, jumped into a new universe. Here's another, we found another Gamora. And it kind of, I think Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was a great example where Marvel's gone wrong, in my opinion, that I loved the first 2 of those movies.
Yeah.
So much of it was the relationship
And
between...
Ant-Man 1 and 2.
Yeah. Well, no, like, so much of the first 2 Guardians was a
Ant-Man
relationship.
3?
Not good.
Not so much.
And there were so many good relationships that came up, and like Guardians to me always struck me was because You had these two movies that had it, and then Infinity War happens and Gamora dies. And then, we just pulled
she's
another
back.
Gamora from another multiverse, but all the character development's gone.
I don't really remember you, but I don't know why you like me.
And I think James Gunn did an admirable job in the third movie, kind of dealing with the hand that he was dealt by what happened. But it just takes away all of that emotional kind of connection that you had to the characters. And I think that's really where you see Marvel struggling is a lot of the plots just don't seem to work anymore. You look at the box office stuff, right? The first Iron Man to the second Iron Man to the third Iron Man, all of them continued to make money and increased in money with each result.
And the plot was like moving along.
There was character
You know,
progression.
you could tell, you could tell it was going someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Now the individual movies are, who knows where they're going? What are they like? If you had to, you'd almost want to say, okay, let's go back to Endgame, forget everything that happened after, and then let's start again.
The way it's gone, it kind of seems like when the snap happened and Tony Stark bit the dust, it almost kind of seems like Marvel bit the dust a bit, and that
They snapped.
when you really look at it, the only huge success they've had was Spider-Man No Way Home, and it's because they used all the Sony Spider-Man characters,
And
Tobey and Garfield and Spider-Man. And it's interesting to me is that I think Marvel since Endgame has become a lot more like DC was, where it's just kind of random movies,
Rudderless. They don't know
no
where
real
they're going.
direction, very loose connections between anything.
And yet both Marvel and DC are striving to capture that Endgame.
Vibe.
Yeah.
It's just not working.
No, and they all seem to think that, we need throw a couple more heroes in there. Whereas, the way Endgame built up, it was like one character at a time. They took their time. They had a solo movie. Maybe they had two with little hints of the other characters. And then it all built up. The Captain America movie was awesome.
Well, by the time you got to an Avengers movie, you felt like you knew those characters. And I think a great example of this is I actually really enjoyed the Moon Knight TV show. But we're a year later, the character hasn't shown up in anything. There's no announced plans for him. And it kind of is just like, was that just created to be content rather than an actual plan? And that kind of is what Disney seems to do, is it kind of just seems to be content for content's sake.
I could tell in Moon Knight that they were trying to have escape routes. And then they wrote several of them in there to where, we could go this way with it. Or if that really doesn't, we could go this way with it.
Yep.
And a lot of the movies seem to have that feel to it. And so what ends up happening is the whole thing falls flat, and you don't really have any real direction to go in.
And where it's, I think, harsher for Marvel is DC kind of made its thing on just appreciate the individual movie. And they didn't do a very good job with that. But at the very least, you could go, okay, they're not really trying to tie all these together. Marvel, because for a decade at least, it was everything is connected, everything is building. When all of a sudden, it just kind of goes where here's just an Ant-Man movie that's just kind of there to be there.
I think Marvel and DC, and we talked about this in the DC thing, they got to go back to the original formula, focus on just one character, and then build from there. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Don't try and throw 4 characters in and then hope something sticks. And you got to have more focus, more direction. So, for example, Spider-Man aside, let's put Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man kind of in his own box because he's been successful well before the MCU.
We'll put him over here for a minute, and then we'll talk like, is Tom Holland really going to be back, or what's going to happen? But like, if you were the new Avi Arad,
or Kevin Feige, the
or
guy
Kevin
who runs
Feige, like, how would you recreate the magic and kind of start over? Would you go with, like, I know the money, the producers are all going to say, well, we got to go with like a big name, and then we could build off of that. But who in Marvel would you pick up at this point? Like, they've touched on so many of their major characters.
Yeah.
Would you go into the catalog and grab somebody?
I think at this point, the stuff they're missing is there's still characters we liked from the first movies. Like, Doctor Strange should have become the new Tony Stark. Instead, he's had one movie. And that movie largely didn't focus on him. It was more about Wanda and tied into a Disney Plus TV series. Go make another great Doctor Strange movie. We like him. He was a big part of Endgame. He's a character you've already established. No, I think they can keep who they have. It's just use the characters that we liked. I think that's the crazy part is they keep Shang-Chi, the Eternals, Moon Knight even, Miss Marvel.
It's like spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah, it's just, let's just throw characters out there. And it's like, no, we kind of firmly established with the first few phases of Marvel. Folks liked Hawkeye, and I think that series did decently because we liked him. People like Doctor Strange.
I would not mind seeing Hawkeye.
Well, and that's the cool part is the great thing comics have always done.
But you can't because they killed off Black Widow.
But I think the cool thing is comics have always done a really cool job when something major happens. Part of what you love is like if a character dies, it's interesting to watch the other character's reaction to it and how they change.
Yeah.
I would have been really interested in seeing, okay, what do the Avengers look like now that Steve and Tony are gone? Who becomes the leader? Right, and then I guess T'Challa's gone too because of the tragedy with Chadwick Boseman, but you could have had a movie about, okay, does Rhodey step up and become kind of the new Iron Man character? Does Sam Wilson really step up and become the Captain America? And I know there was a TV show on Disney Plus where he became Captain America, but it would have been really interesting to see, okay, the Avengers are gone, who becomes the new Avengers? And like, Thor to me would have been the easy character if you wanted to get people on board. With Tony and Cap gone, you could have very easily had it be Thor steps up and wants to take over and create the Avengers because he knows the world and all the realms need it. And instead it's like, no, let's throw him into space with the Guardians and make a weird movie with Love and Thunder. So I think for me, if I was running it, I would bring back Thor, I would bring back Doctor Strange, I would bring back Rhodey, I would create an Avengers movie around that. And I know they have some Avengers movie planned, but it kind of seems like those are focused on multiverse. I think at this point the audience has kind of had enough of the multiverse stuff.
Yeah, I would tend to go, let's just start again with one character and build from there. Make me a really good let me think. Hulk's been rebooted too many times.
I mean, they did acquire the rights to Fantastic Four and X-Men too, and that's the other thing.
Well, they could do Fantastic Four again, and I think they are.
They are, but like it's one of those things. Like
but
the
I'm
movie
worried
was
about
announced 4 years ago.
Yeah.
There's no cast. We have no idea. Apparently, it's supposed to come out in like 2 years, but there's no cast. We have no idea how it's going to tie into anything.
Jack Kirby would have loved a Thing solo movie. We should have a Thing solo movie.
Yeah.
But a Ben Grimm story could be good. Make it sort of noir-esque, maybe.
Well, and they haven't really done the Fantastic Four great in the movies. There's a couple that I think are better than they get credit for, and maybe we'll talk about that in a later one.
Yeah, that's another video we got coming up.
But the Fantastic Four really haven't received their due credit. And I know it's been announced, it's been out there. It was 4 years ago they came out, hey, we're doing a Fantastic Four movie, and yet
nothing.
We've had a Miss Marvel series, a Hawkeye series, a Moon Knight series, a Falcon. Loki's getting a second season of his TV show. They just don't seem to have a plan, and it's like you needed figures to step up and be the new Tony, be the new Cap.
Yeah.
And they haven't done that. And so for me, that's the thing. I hope Marvel pauses a bit. Release whatever you've got. I know that Deadpool is coming out, Deadpool 3, that's going to supposedly be in the MCU. Let that be, but I really hope they just take some time to kind of pause and go, okay, where do we reset this? Who are our new central figures going to be?
What's so frustrating is in the board meetings, they have conversations like this all the time, but who's at those board meetings? And, the producers are in there, and and maybe, well, their son-in-law's a writer. Let's let him. I don't know what's going on. I mean, but if you went back to some really good comic book writers, and asked them, like, what should we do?
It's interesting because
Joe
you kind of saw
maybe.
When you
Kevin
saw
Feige.
all the original writers from Phase 1s, 2, and 3, all these successful movies, you saw them all kind of get shipped out. And then Phase 4 happened. It was, let's bring in these new voices. and hasn't worked. I think at this point you have to admit, if you're Marvel, it's kind of been a failure. Go back and bring back some of those folks who made this stuff work in the first place. Go back to some of those old directors. And it's not saying you need to rehash those movies, but conceptually those guys knew how to build a universe. They understood with, okay, this can build to this. And it was kind of like dominoes where it all just fell into line. Whereas right now it's going a million different ways. Yeah. And you don't really have any captain of the ship, it seems.
It was like capturing lightning in a bottle that first 15 years of Marvel. It'll be hard to recreate that magic, but that's really what's required. It's a hefty challenge. DC's trying to do it now too. So, I mean,
and it's funny how they've kind of both ended up in the same scenario where. Yeah. And the larger thing I've heard a lot of people talk about is like, is this maybe the end of the comic book movie? Is this the comic book movie kind of reaching its natural endpoint? I don't really think it is, because I don't think comic book movies have failed because people are tired of superheroes. They're tired of poorly written movies.
Yeah, I think that's very true. That's very true.
When I hear people like, oh, well, people maybe just were tired of Ant-Man. No, people were fine with Ant-Man. Your Ant-Man movie was created poorly, and there was no character arc. And I've had this argument with DC for years, and I think it's the same thing Marvel's going through now. DC doesn't have bad characters that people don't like. They hired bad writers who didn't understand the characters and created bad movies. And so I just hope, go back to the board as far as the people that you had at the beginning. Bring them back in. And I think, like, me and Mike have talked about this a lot. Wakanda Forever was a movie that I thought overall, with what it had to deal with T'Challa being dead in real life, the actor, making that decision to recast, they had a lot going against it. But even with that, you watch that movie, how they took the character of Namor from the comic books and put that character on screen that was in that movie.
Yeah,
said this is Namor.
The CG guy said, "Oh, and we could make his feet flap, like we'll put the little wings on there."
And of all the stuff they changed in the comics, right? They changed so much from the comics.
And the sound effects guy was like, "Oh, I can make the sound for that."
Yeah, it's like a little hummingbird.
I'll never forget that sound.
And it's just,
I was like, what's going on here?
Even if you wanted to change Namor for the sake of, let's get, a more diverse cast, that's okay. But you're not going to make it Atlantis. You're going to make the character, the whole time he's trying to kill a little girl, he kills Black Panther's mom. Like,
that was
Namor is a hero from World War II, and yes, at times he's extreme, but you basically just turned him into kind of a pathetic villain.
It was bad. But there were so many parts of that movie that were really good.
Yeah, and it's they can't seem to get out of their own way.
If you took that part out,
just shift it a little bit. And I think that's the other part, is like, they're throwing too much out there without any thought.
There's a character that they just left by the wayside, Submariner.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
you could still bring him back, because whatever that was not Submariner.
Yeah, it wasn't Submariner.
So you could bring him back.
Well, even if you brought back the same actor, maybe you could save that character. But you have to get someone who likes the Submariner and doesn't look at the Submariner and go, "This is a character, we just need a villain, he's going to be the villain." Because it's completely different if Black Panther 2 is a T'Challa versus Namor story and T'Challa beats him. Because as a comic fan, I can go, okay, I buy it. Black Panther, T'Challa, that guy, he can beat Namor. His sister, who just put on the uniform 5 seconds ago, fights him and kicks his butt. No, it doesn't really work. And from a narrative standpoint, and it's this rush to, well, we need to make her the new Black Panther, so how do we do that? She wins the battle at the end. And it doesn't feel earned. It kind of more feels like, we want you to feel this way, so we're going to make that happen, regardless of whether it actually makes sense.
It felt more like, we need to crank out 3 more billion-dollar movies out of this character, and the actor we perfectly cast is now deceased. What are we going to do, board of directors? Again, it's more like a financial thinking, and it's not really comic book.
It almost seems like the fans and the people who like the movies are the last people they think about.
Yeah.
It's almost like, we just need to make content, and we're just going to put it out.
And if we just put Black Panther on it, we'll make $1 billion. And not even care about the characters in the story.
And it wasn't the worst movie. I'm not going to sit here and act like I didn't enjoy pieces of it. but it could have been so much better, especially because of how great the first movie was.
I really liked the beginning of that movie.
No, they handled some great things.
I loved the end. There were whole chunks of that movie that I was just like, man, this is really cool. And it tugged at your heart and everything. But then
they just reshoot themselves in the foot the next scene.
Ruined it for me. You know, and Submariner's a character I really like from Marvel, you know. A very interesting character with a lot of history. There's so much to do there.
He has such an intricate tie to the Fantastic Four that you kind of start screwing up other movies.
Yeah.
Because now, okay, this Namor, who's an established killer who went to war with Wakanda, him having any kind of flirtation with Sue Storm in the Fantastic Four movie would make no sense now. That's not a character she would be interested in. Meaning you kind of have to ruin the Fantastic Four and Namor's relationship. And then I think the other part that I just hope they stop is, please stop the Disney Plus shows. You can kind of tell in these movies where there's like, oh, we're going to introduce, like Black Panther again, we're going to introduce this Riri Williams character who's going to be Ironheart. Oh, look, tune in soon on Disney Plus for her series.
Yeah.
And it hurt the movie, and then no one's really watching the TV series because you trained us for a decade that, hey, you can get everything you need from the movie theater.
Yeah.
And now it's like, no, go home and watch this 6-part mini-series that kind of falls apart at the end, and then come back for a movie that doesn't connect to the TV series in any way, and then another TV series, and it just... Sometimes less is more, and I think that's probably the biggest lesson Marvel needs to learn is that right now, you need to make less content. You need to make quality content over
Think about
just
the
a ton
quality over quantity.
So, I mean, from your end, Mike, if you had to pick who is the character you think that best has a chance to replace Tony Stark as kind of the heart of Marvel, given the characters they have left and the characters that they've already kind of cast?
That's tough. I mean, for the Avengers, the last two standing are really are Thor and Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Hawkeye was always
kind of a side
tertiary character. So I would, you know, and I like how they cast Bruce Banner. I really do. So I think, you know, and I think, you know, Thor's my favorite Marvel character.
Yeah,
he's my favorite. And I really love the actor that they cast as Thor. I know that they placed him in bad movies, but I think I would
he still does a good job.
My heart of heart, I would like to see him take up the mantle and carry Avengers forward if they were going to. He could redeem himself. The actor's tremendous. You know, with
I think it would be a good
awesome
way to kind of close his chapter too. I think if you had him lead one kind of final battle, if you want it, because it doesn't sound like he's going to stick around much longer.
Yeah.
I think give him one kind of last glorious like battle that he takes on. But I really just hope less content. As a fan, that's weird to say that, but I think at this point we've reached a content overload. And they need to get less. I think go back to some of the creative minds.
Crank it down a little bit. And then quality over content.
Like bring back the characters we loved in the first part.
Quantity.
Like everyone liked Rhodey. Rhodey hasn't really shown up in any major way in anything 3 or 4 years after Endgame now. Folks really, bring him back. Have him. And I know there's a planned movie. That's the other thing. Is like there's all these planned movies. Like supposedly there's an Armor Wars movie with Rhodey. Doesn't really seem to have a start date. Doesn't really seem to be happening. Hasn't seen any development. Supposedly there's a Fantastic Four movie. Hasn't seen any casting. Hasn't seen any development. Hasn't had anything happen.
We'll have to see.
And I guess as your hope is just kind of hopefully they can just put themselves back on track. But we'll see where they go from here.
Well, before they kick us out, because it's getting close to closing time here at Alamo Ranch, Dragon's Lair. Let's go over what's in the stack. What you got in the stack today?
So for me on the stack, just some old reprints. This is the first appearance of Doom Patrol and a reprint they did. This is closing out a Tarzan series that has been recently going. Really great artwork and story from Dan Jurgens, kind of an old school DC writer. He's done great. A recent Daredevil series. This is issue 13. I think there's one left of that. Really, really great stuff by Chip Zdarsky. And then the only other new one I'm picking up right now is this Rocketeer series that just launched. Very nostalgic for me, the Rocketeer. It's an old 90s movie I really liked, so it's great to see him back. And then just a couple other reprints that have come out recently. So some Hulk, 180 and 181, really what I've kind of had going for this week.
For me, I'm getting into Blade Runner 2039. Love those covers. It's looking awesome. Getting ready to continue that story. I finally got caught up on my Blue Book reading. I love that story. Don't care for the art too much. I'm supposed to be reading this, but I haven't read that yet.
GCPD, the Blue Wall.
Yeah, I did get one of these because who could resist a reprint like that? That was really cool. I got this today. I'm thinking about giving this a try. Of course, I love the Frank Frazetta covers. Death Dealer is pretty cool. Every year or two, I try and read Promethea again. So I'm getting ready to do that. I used to have this in trade paperback form.
Picking up the solo issues.
But I am finding the single issues and loving Promethea. That's from way back at the beginning of the turn of the century. I am buying, finally, after years and years, buying the second run of Flash from the 80s when Wally West took over. Here's that beautiful Promethea first cover. Awesome art, awesome writing. I'm supposed to be reading this, but I haven't started the Barbarians yet. The Last Barbarians. I'm reading Dawn Attack. Dawn Attack has been pretty awesome. I'm enjoying that. And that's basically it for me this week.
So, always a lot of good comics out there, especially even the old school stuff. Cool seeing some reprints that have come out lately. Those facsimiles are always great to see and get to revisit some classics.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks again. Two guys in a stack of comics. We will see you in the next video.
We'll see you next time.